Hey everybody, this is Jackie Luqman and Abdishahid Luqman, and welcome to another edition of Live in Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation.
The most controversial and threatening show on social media anywhere. Guaranteed.
Anywhere. Absolutely guaranteed. So today is we've been having a good time today because we had a
Yeah.
show earlier, talked to Leanne
That
Moonraven
was pretty
earlier,
good.
my friend who is over in the UK,
Across the pond.
across the pond.
Yep.
Talked about the differences with what's going on over there as opposed to over here. Very, very similar. And as you can see, we have more special guests, and we are extremely honored to have with us tonight to talk about coronavirus in regard to some local and national issues and some global implications too. First, we have Reverend Graylin Hagler. Reverend Hagler is our pastor. He is the senior pastor of Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ here in Washington, D.C. He's also the executive director of Faith Strategies. Rev, tell folks about Faith Strategies because that's a pretty great organization.
The faith strategy is really a collective of clergy that work around issues of social justice, particularly on the progressive side, to help movements connect with the faith community. Because very often, we operate in silos where we don't know how to get to faith folks or talk to faith folks, and so faith strategies become that bridge between labor, between community, between justice seekers, and helping the church to get to embracing those types of justice issues.
And we are, of course, involved in activities with Plymouth Congregational United Church of Christ with our pastor and Faith Strategies. But we are also members of another organization we are very proud to be members of. And our second guest is Netfa Freeman. Netfa is the organizer of Pan-African Community Action. And Netfa, tell us about PACA.
I don't have my elevator speech ready. PACA, Pan African Community Action, we're based in Washington, D.C. We're a Pan African organization that believes in building or trying to build grassroots power by the most impacted of our people, the working class, black people in the area, grassroots power, trying to shift power to the most impacted through participatory programs of action and political education.
So thank you all both for joining us. We really appreciate you guys coming on and talking about these issues on the local level and on the national, even the international level that we're going to get into in a minute relating to corona, not just coronavirus, but like coronavirus. We've been saying this for weeks and weeks. This virus and the responses of state and federal governments has exposed everything that is just lacking in this system in this country. We're going to get into a couple of those things, but for people, hun, who have not watched the news a lot, and you shouldn't, because goodness knows, there's so much bad news out there, and you have to take care of yourself. It's really hard to do that when you are isolating for your health, and all you have to, if you don't read a lot, you're going to sit there and watch TV all the time, and the next thing you know, you're going to be sitting there watching the news
Right.
all the time. And that is not healthy for you, but it is good to stay on top of the issues. And these are some pretty sobering numbers. As of today, the confirmed cases of coronavirus in the United States are 1,156,924. They added 23,855 confirmed cases of people who are infected with coronavirus.
Wow.
There have been 67,498 deaths. 1,113 more people died today from this virus. Now, there have been hundreds of thousands of people who have recovered from this virus, and I think that's important to mention. It is also important to mention that right now the death toll has surpassed the number of American troops who died over the 10 years of the Vietnam War. Now, this does not mean that that number surpasses everyone who died in the Vietnam War. That's that I have to be very careful how I say that, because American troops killed hundreds of thousands
Well, of course,
of
yeah.
Vietnamese
That's right, yeah.
and Cambodians. But you know how we do. We measure these things by how many Americans were killed. And I mean, 10 years of one war, this virus has killed more people, more American soldiers than were killed in 10 years of one war. And this virus has done that in 2.5 months. So that's very, very sobering.
Well, I mean, first of all, I would like to just thank our audience who some of our regulars who have joined on already. We thank you, and we appreciate you joining us. We always, as we always say every week, share this video, share this live stream. If you don't have notifications, click the notifications on, click the on button on your notifications so that you can be notified the next time that Jackie and I are on the air. Also on YouTube, you can subscribe. You can also click on the notifications there. We have a specific YouTube audience that just love to hang out on YouTube.
Yes.
And so we're not complaining about that, but we welcome those over there too. And but Jackie, again, what you said is it's really frightening. The fact of the number of COVID deaths that is happening in this country. And so when we come back, we're going to take a break. And we're going to come back, but before we take a break, something that you had said earlier about digesting the news and ingesting the news and all this other kind of stuff. We always say on Luqman Nation to be selective. A lot of times, everybody's different. Some of us have the capacity to endure more than others, and so if you feel like you're being overwhelmed by bad news, then just limit it or turn it off. You have that choice to do that. And those of us who are able to endure a little bit more, even we have to take care of ourselves. I mean, yesterday we went out for a walk with the dog. So,
Mask and gloves, with masks and gloves.
Exactly. So, so I mean, again, as best as we can, try to balance life. Life is about balance, and so we try to balance it as much as we can in these difficult times. Be respectful, because we're finding out that some people are using this pandemic as an excuse to be even ruder, more aggressive. We seen a lot of aggressive driving yesterday. We seen a lot of people who, again, are using this pandemic as a way of infringing upon the rights and of other people. So we just ask that this you don't have to use that as an excuse. So continue to respect each other's space, respect each other's dignity, and that would at least help it out a little bit more. We don't have to worry about that. So as we go to a break, we'll come back and we'll begin with Reverend Hagler and that's for Freeman, and stick around.
Be right back. Hey folks, we have returned and we're going to get right into this discussion now. We are here, Luqman Nation is here in Washington, D.C. If you did not know that before, you know it now. We are in the belly of the beast. And, this city is being affected by the virus just like everywhere else in the country. Our church has been affected by the virus, and a few faith communities have been affected by the virus pretty hard. And I think part of that was because in the beginning and around March, early March, people weren't taking it very seriously, the end of February, early March, because people were taking their cues from the administration. So there were still regular church services going on in some places. And I think, like at the end of February, there were a couple of, and I think the Kojic community, the Church of God in Christ community, was hit particularly hard, where several people, bishops in the Kojic denomination, attended a conference, and I think they attended a couple of funerals right at the end of February. And then people fell ill as the virus began to spread, and some people succumbed to the virus. So, Reverend Hagler, we have been conducting virtual services at Plymouth for about how long now?
Probably about six weeks or more.
Yeah, and it's been great. We've loved them, and we've had the opportunity to talk to several members of our sick and shut in community. They've loved the services. We've been able to find ways to. We have one person who calls a member and holds their phone to the computer so that the older person can listen to the service because they don't have a computer, they don't have access to the computer. So, we're finding ways to connect people, to keep people connected to the faith community. But there have been challenges still. So, can you talk to that just for a minute or two? What has it been like being the senior minister of a church in this time of coronavirus and we can't be physically together?
Well, I think that one of the things is that there's a few things. One is it really shows in terms of grassroots communities of color, that even though we may have computers, some of us, and we may have cell phones, we're still behind the curve in terms of technology. And so part of this has been having to catch up to the basic technology, and not only the churches to catch up to the basic technology, but then how do you get your folks to access the basic technology? Because they really have been intimidated from that. One of the things that's very important to point out is that as the coronavirus really hit and came into swing and people started social distancing, things like church revenues went down to 0%. I'm not talking about 50%. I'm not talking about 35% or so. They went down to 0%. So it was a 100% drop in terms of revenues, and that meant that you had people who were on staff that had to either be laid off or cut back on hours. So that was another impact you had, and so folks had to catch up. And what I'm raising that issue for is because there's a number of pieces going around, articles going around that across the country, some of the churches, particularly churches of color, that have closed during this coronavirus will not reopen because they did not have the wherewithal to withstand the season of famine. And so you're going to have many of them, like you're going to have a lot of small businesses that are not going to reopen.
Right.
And particularly when it comes down to communities of color, that's even a heavy impact. And so one of the things that the virus really demonstrated was this system of inequality that exists. Inequality in terms of technology, inequality in terms of the types of ability that folks have to withstand a storm like this. And not only to mention, particularly people of color, we've been hit hard because one, we got older people, but you just can't rest it at older people because we had another brother who passed because he was a home health care worker,
Exactly.
and he could not remotely work, and so he got exposed. Have another church member who worked for, and I'll say an H&R Block as a tax preparer. And H&R Block told her that she was an essential worker and that she needed to come in and that they were not going to supply personal protection equipment. And that she had to be. Well, when you think about it, why can't you do tax preparation remotely? You're using a computer in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reality is she decided that it was better for her to quit than to
Mm.
go through that mess, and so she quit that job in order to protect herself. But we find out that particularly black and brown communities are in these kinds of positions and jobs where they are doing the kinds of service employees. They're stocking the shelves in grocery
Mm-hmm.
stores. They're mopping the floors in hospitals. They're doing home health care and all that other type of stuff. And so, in a sense, while everybody is sort of like remotely working, we're working in the moat, in the trenches. And so that's one thing that's got hit hard. One thing that's interesting, and everybody's acting surprised and shocked. For your listeners across the country, I live in an area that's called Ward 4. Ward 4 has this reputation of being well heeled and has this reputation of being well resourced
Mm-hmm.
and the black intelligentsia living up here on the Gold Coast and all
Mm-hmm.
that other type of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
so Ward 4 is quite shocked that they're leading the city in terms of the coronavirus infections and deaths.
Really?
Wow.
They're surprised.
So they're leading the whole city. And the reason is because they thought of themselves in that way, but they forgot about the low wage working folks who also lived in the community, the
Mm.
elderly that lived in the community, folks who had to face this virus with less protection than other folks that lived in this community. And so when it got hit, it was clearly shown that it was a ward there was two separate wards. There was the ward of the politically connected and those who saw themselves as the elite, and there was the ward in the same ward of the working class poor and those who were just trying to survive and the elderly.
I mean, it. I mean, I would like to say that these are issues that surprise us, but Rev, I mean, we've been battling these kind of issues before coronavirus hit.
Mm-hmm.
This has been dealing with the class issues and the race issues and the inequality in the city that affect our people, members of our congregation, and people in the city in general. This is stuff that we've been working on since we've been members of the church, and it's what you've been working on your entire career as a so-called man of the cloth. This is, I mean, so none of this is new. It is not new, and it is. I don't know. I'm trying to be nice because you are our pastor, so I said I was going to behave myself today. So, I mean, this is not. I'm shocked that people are shocked, and I shouldn't be, but I have to remember that all of us are not as aware of the inequalities as they exist among us as uh, we are on this Zoom. So it frustrates me that people are shocked that
Yeah, but
that
but
there's
but
this inequality.
right, but it's also Rev, as what I hear what you're explaining. It's also a microcosm of what's happening across the country too, isn't it?
Right, cross country, and the thing is in D.C. it gets really accented because you got black folks that are shocked that black folks are leading in terms of statistics of infection and fatalities, and in a sense, you've had folks with their heads stuck in the sand, basically trying to deny the continued effects of racism and inequality that exist in the society and the vestiges of white supremacy that continue to plague our lives. I mean, it's just like people like to sort of like go through a city and only see what they choose to see because they only associate with those that are just like them. And it's just like right now, the city is bending over backwards trying to get rid of all the tents that have accumulated under the bridge, under the railroad tracks there on K Street. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's seen there's too many of them. You got too many gentrifiers upset. All them homeless folk out there. When the homeless folk, they rather sleep out there than to go in the shelter because
Mm.
everybody's trying to push them in the shelter. But the shelter has become more dangerous for their survival than it is sleeping on the streets. And,
Now,
and we don't have an adequate solution for that.
Reverend Hagler, I wanted to segue into another. I know that you've been on the front lines when it comes to the DC jail and the conditions of the DC jail. You yourself, who have been there quite a few times, and I also want to bring Netfa Freeman into this too because there seems to be with this inequality, the way that um, uh, uh, the officials and government officials and the way that the DC jail is handled and the way that policing is being done as a way of continuing to oppress black and brown people, especially in this area. What is happening now? What could you tell us about the conditions of the DC jail?
Well, we were out there the other night in an encampment with a lot of the returning community and their advocates and family because the calls have been coming into the returning advocate groups that people were up there without soap, without drinking water, without hot water, all that type of stuff. The coronavirus had spread rapidly through the facility. I think they were talking about 157 cases of infection, 37 employees as of the 26th of April. And so, again, the city was caught off guard in terms of how to deal with that. Obviously, you can't do the social distancing well in jail. Well, the fact is that jail is not sanitary at all. Whether you're talking about the DC jail or whether you're talking about DC Central Cell Block.
Right.
They're filthy places as it stands. Needs to be clean, needs to be torn down. Let me put it that way. And we need to have a different kind of facility there. But again, it's sort of like we operate in this perspective, and this is sort of a very, very sort of selfish capitalist point of view, where we decide there's throwaway people that we should not be really that concerned about. And if they live in filth, then they deserve to live in filth. That's our attitude. We've been also trying to get a halfway house, a residential facility into Washington, D.C. That's coming. It's coming. Took some time because the residential facility for men have now closed, the one that had the contract, because they were, again, a very poorly run residential reentry facility. What it really was for the last 30 years was a cash cow for politicians. A lot of money went through those coffers into politicians' pockets that basically protected them even though their reputation was bad, even though people were being killed as a result of going there, people were killing as a result of going there, and 3 deaths just recently up in there. But they had been protected. The politicians wanted to protect them. So when the group that we were working with won its contract, they had secured a facility, for example, in Ward 5. The shenanigans of the Ward 5 City Council member, Kenyon McDuffie, and the shenanigans of a developer Doug Jamal, went and basically Doug Jamal pulled the lease that he had agreed to lease to the organization, pulled it unexpectedly, allowing the incumbent halfway house to go back to the Federal Bureau of Prison and said, how could you give them the contract? They don't have a place. Well, it was set up for them not to have a place. And so when folks talk right now about these deaths in Hope Village, if they hadn't played political games, maybe they would not have been those deaths. If that was operative. But it's just like, it's so typical. Every politician, particularly politicians of color, and I'm going to blame politicians of color, black politicians, always want to turn around and say, oh, we support our returning citizens. We support them, but don't put them here. We believe that our returning citizens need a break, but don't put them here. We believe that they need a program that's going to help them get on their feet, but don't put them here. Everybody has this attitude, don't put it here, because they don't really love or care for returning citizens, just some political things to say. So we got a campaign that we're starting. And the campaign is based upon 70,000 strong. We looked at the returning folks who are advocates in the city. It's about 70,000 people that exist right now who have returned and need to be activated. So we're putting together with Ron Moten and others a group called 70,000 strong with the theme that if you don't want me, you don't love me.
Wow.
Talk about love all they want, but if you don't want me, you don't love me.
Now, Netfa, to bring you in this conversation now that we're talking about the what Reverend Hagler had just basically laid out for us. They're also now talking about politicians of color. Now, we're talking about politicians of color who are still at the helm of not only just D.C., but in other urban areas where there is, again, we're already the most heavily policed community that that exists. What do you see? Because again, Reverend Happy brought up a good point about black politicians who are allowing these things on their watch. And therefore, if you may, could you really illustrate for us what is what is the policing like? Because we know that PACA, your organization, which we're members of, have already prior to COVID have already been in the process of community
community control
right
over the
control of
police,
police on so,
educating and advocating for that.
right. So could you never illustrate that for us, please?
If we could, maybe I'll go back and where we're segueing from in terms of the black politicians in that class. So we call them, a lot of them call them the Black Misleadership class.
Exactly. Yep.
Really what it is. We're talking about systemic issues. We're talking about a system that's really designed to, when it comes to the political arena or the electoral politics, to attract the most opportunist elements of the society, the most disingenuous, opportunist elements that in order for them to, and actually it's almost a qualification, the unspoken qualifications, because you have to be beholden to the capitalist class that really has no interest no interest in seeing a more socialized, more humane system. They're about exploitation. They're about amassing wealth, and so in order to be in office, you got to be beholden to that class. So it does attract those kind of people, and it attracts people that will say anything in order to get into office. So, and not only in order to get into office, but also do what we have to be concerned with damage control, public relations. So they'll say, "Oh yeah, we're concerned with turning citizens," but then that's what they say, and what they do is something different always. And this is not just DC; this is all over the place. And so this system, which is really incompatible with trying to deal with emergency, like pandemic, like any kind of crisis, because these kind of crises really call for a different order, something that's much more cooperative, something that rationalizes resources. Because under capitalism, they want the capitalists are in control, and the government and the state is really a tool of the capitalists. And so so under a neoliberal, the capitalist order model, they want less government control and organizing things, and they want themselves to be in control and doing, having the government do whatever is best interest for them. That's why they get bailed out. We get little $1,200 checks or whatever we get, because it's really about keeping the system together, and as opposed to actually doing what's better for the society as a whole. To get to your question about the police, so the police, and we have to, if we go back, and I'm not going to go back too far, but we have to remember this is how this country was founded.
Right, that's right.
Racialized exploitation, of people of color, white supremacist, capitalist, patriarchal exploitation. And so that's what we're seeing today. It's just mashed a different kind of way, and they have the most sophisticated propaganda and media apparatus to make us think that we live in another kind of society. That's why black people can be surprised when we're dying disproportionately with things like this pandemic. And in fact, when this happens, this is par for the course, where we die disproportionately when it comes to all the other different things, and particularly even when it comes to the agents of the state leveling their brutality and their mass incarceration and over policing on us. I think one of the things we have to be careful of in this pandemic, and it's not just in this era, this crisis, and it's not just in DC, it's not just even in the United States, is that the forces, the global forces of capital will use this crisis as an excuse to put in more surveillance, to put in lockdowns, to put in over more policing, because even before this health crisis, the pandemic crisis, the system was in a state on the path of collapsing. You're having more with austerity and automation and all that. You're having more of what they would be considered to them an expendable population.
Right.
And disproportionately, that expendable population is also it's all working class people in the broadest sense of the term, but it's also mostly non-white working class. We're the most expendable. And so right now, because we're expendable, and this system is not designed to handle this crisis. There's a whole lot. It's not just people dying from the. It's not just the really what it's going for. They're not even the healthcare system is not even worthy of the name of healthcare system. But it's also other things. The collapse of the economy, where people really it can't afford for the business and everything to go back to normal. I mean, to stay out of to be continue the social distancing. But at the same time, there's the contradiction. If we do go back too soon and in this unprepared way, it's going to continue the deaths and the suffering, and the hospitals will be overwhelmed. If it was a different kind of order, we could look at other countries like Cuba and small Cuba. There's not having a big economic crisis as a result of this pandemic, and even handling it well. Even, and I'm not trying to over glorify any country. China has come out of it. That we have to look at there are different things that this country is really unprepared to do. It's incompatible with it. They can't give us healthcare. They can't give us guaranteed income or any of that kind of stuff because it goes against capitalism. It's against opposite capitalism. So their only response is, and can only be, as more people are out of work and more desperation happens, will be to lock, to police, come down with the police. And so there's going to be more unrest. And with our treatment, when we have to protest and we stand up, it's not going to be the same treatment as you see these the right-wing people out here saying open up the economy and protesting against the social distancing and the lockdowns or the closing of business. Is not going to be the treatment they get. In fact, we already see now they're not treating us the same way when it comes to this over policing happening in our communities right now. It was always there, but it's increased now, and we have to be careful because as we are organizing to respond differently for survival programs, mutual aid programs, and those kind of things that actually in their existence is a threat to the system. It's actually presenting a different paradigm to the system that they will actually use the excuse. We've seen it. We've seen Amazon workers be charged with not practicing social distancing when in fact they're actually just trying to organize for the rights of the working rights of actually being able to be protected. They're going to use this time as an excuse to clamp down on our people who are really trying to organize for a different way of being and trying to organize for survival.
I'm so glad that you brought up a couple of those examples, especially how these so-called other countries that that the president once called S-hole countries and all this other kind of stuff, how they seem to be getting a handle on this pandemic. Jackie and I was talking about, and because we share Pan-Africanist views, we were even talking about how even Senegal, I believe, came up with a economical way of being able to test everyone. And a lot of African countries who have had experience with Ebola outbreaks and other viral outbreaks, how they have basically through their own ingenuity, even not even having nowhere near the size of the economy that the United States boasts of, and so they're able to at least be able to do a lot better job than the United States. And so, Jackie, when you were talking about this whole thing of "Make America Great" and this whole myth making propaganda, as you said, Netfa, as far as Americans being propagandized into believing that this is the greatest country on earth, where in actuality it's countries like Vietnam who haven't experienced a single COVID death, I believe.
Right.
It's countries like South Korea who have been able to successfully deal with the with the COVID pandemic outbreak.
Right.
Countries like Venezuela and Cuba, and again Senegal and others. Right. So and the fact remains that, and Jackie, you and I were talking about, we must really they look like clowns to the rest of the world, where you have no one is protesting about. And you guys come in anytime you want, but nobody in this country is these protesters. They're not protesting about better working conditions after the COVID pandemic. They're not protesting about other things as far as the economy, the military-industrial complex, and all these other things. No, they want a haircut. They're talking about they want haircuts. They want. And Reverend Hagler, I remember you said about how we need to look at the type of businesses that they want opened up. And what do you mean by that?
Well, when you look at the businesses that want opened up, it really has to do with kinds of businesses that really people are in ways unable to do any kind of personal distancing. And so, when you talk about salons and you talk about spas and you talk about things like that, you basically are endangering people through entertainment or through beauty supplies. And let me point this out because I think this is important. Every time we go through a crisis, we permanently lose rights.
Wow.
September the 11th brought in the Patriot Act.
Mm-hmm.
Folks just rolled over because it was going to protect us from them out there, terrorists. So here we are now. We got folks in our own community advocating that things like Apple and others come up with the ability to do tracing,
Right, right, tracking.
which is a fancy word for I'm going to surveil exactly who you met with. I'm going to know your network. I'm going to know all the contacts that you done had in a particular day, in a particular month, a particular year. I can pull it up anytime because that's what. And so we're going to roll over backwards and we're going to say, okay, yeah, come on in. And believe it or not, I got black groups advocating for that.
Oh my goodness.
To be protected. I was on the phone just in one of these conference things the other day with groups around healthcare advocating for that because they feel it's going to keep them safe. Now, there's some real tremendous lessons in this thing, and this is almost like this is like biblical prophecy,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, just think of it. 3.5 years, we done dealt with the rhetoric of keeping immigrants out. We done dealt with the rhetoric of all the white supremacist organizations. We dealt with the rhetoric of supporting the white supremacist organizations, basically bloating up the military with all types of obscene expenditures so that you end up with one of the greatest deficits in history. Diverting that money also to build a wall on the southern border, to do everything to sort of keep this little mad crew feeling secure and safe from the teeming mobs of people of color out there that they are so afraid of losing their country. And then they find out that a virus has stopped them. A virus has taken them down. Something that they can't bomb, something that a wall can't keep out. And so it has the dimension of sort of biblical prophecy, biblical proportion, that you just shown up, that you actually got clay feet. You can call yourself the richest country in the world, you can call yourself a superpower, it doesn't matter. The fact is that this pandemic will probably not be the only pandemic that we're going to deal with in recent times, because that's the way we are right now in this world. And so the thing is that we've been shown to be unprepared. We've been shown to put our investments in the wrong place. Instead of investing in medical infrastructure, instead of investing in health care for every single person, instead of investing in scientific research that is going to do something constructive and positive, not put a military in space, but something that's actually going to deal with raising up and lifting up and enhancing the human race. We made our investments in the wrong place, and it's just very clear. This is what God does. God shows up your folly. Folly has been shown.
I mean, I feel like that, aside from that being like a mini sermon, thank you so much, that leads me to ask this question, Rev, about this DC Reopen Committee. Now, it's not the only committee, because there are a lot of states that are trying to reopen these businesses that you just mentioned. Are all businesses that are service industry businesses.
Exactly.
They are businesses literally that just serve other people, and I had mentioned at some point before that that's really what these folks are out here protesting for. They don't want to go to work. That's not what they really want. They want businesses to be opened up so they can be served again. Because I contend if they really want to go to work so bad, All those meat packing plants are hiring folks right now. And I know that's not very Christian right now. I'm sorry, I repent, but that's what I felt. So that's what I said. So,
Let me throw this out there. What you're looking at in terms of these reopen the states and reopen the U.S. rallies is really dry runs towards the election in the fall. That's why they're toting assault weapons and going into state houses and things like that. Because they're going to do their best to try to intimidate voters like they did in 1876 at the point of a gun. And so the reality is I believe that this is a dry run. That's why you got these cross messages coming from the same place, where you got this so-called president listening halfway to his medical folk, and at the same time got Betsy DeVos, got the Koch brothers funding these operations state by state of all these white supremacist gun-toting groups to activate them as a dry run towards what we're going to see in September, October, and November.
You know,
yeah.
Netfa, we have a viewer on Facebook who were just talking about the protesters. And so our viewer says, I mean that, you know, and they're referring to the protesters, they were able to bring whole guns into a state capitol building. And, you know, and so, and we talk about this all the time. If this was us, you know, going up there to the state capitol building, even if we were demanding the same issues,
Right.
you know, we would have been met with a different result.
Well, remember the Black Panther Party going into the
I
California
was about to
space.
say, yeah.
Yeah, Nefa, go ahead.
Go ahead.
That's right. I mean, that's really what initiated the gun control movement here. It was the Black Panther Party. Who was that? I can't remember the movie. It was in California, and it was the something. I can't remember the amendment that first initiated. Oh, it's right on.
Oh, the Mulford Act.
Mulford. That's right, the Mulford Act. And it was only because the Black Panther Party was organized and were using the law and had their guns and all that. And it went up to the state building, and so that's really what initiated. You had, was it Ronald Reagan or
Yes, it was.
they were the Republicans were behind even the NRA supported the Mulford Act. But so we can see the double standards here, and that was very interesting what you said, Reverend Hagler, because I hadn't thought about that. But this dry run thing, I do believe that some of the stuff I know that some of the stuff that's motivating these people is really to protect their system. It's not just to have but they are seeing the handwriting on the wall just like we're seeing it. The only difference is they want to protect the system. We know we need to have work, we need to have income. We don't want to put ourselves in danger, and there's really no reason for people to have to be in danger. If things weren't ordered around the maximizing of profits for a few and the concentration of capital for a few, then there's no reason why the social distancing and that kind of stuff couldn't happen to the extent that it needs to, and then people not be able to be returned back to things the way the way they should be. Right now, we're not even in what we had before. It wasn't even something we should want. I saw a meme one time that said, very recently, that said, do we really want things to go back to normal? And they put that normal quotations in the sense that what normal was for many of us before this even happened was hyper exploitation, was working long hours, was not even maybe even having a job, having access to health care and food and healthy food and all those kind of things. That was normal. And what this pandemic is doing is exposing all of those inequalities and also the inadequacy, the ineptness of the system to be able to respond appropriately to what's happening right now. But I want to also just mention too, in terms of there are other actions taking place. There are another movement, and so right now we've been remiss if we didn't hold up the people's strike.
Exactly.
Demands of people are holding a bunch of holistic, very holistic demands that are saying that we need to have a strike. May 1st, Friday was the first one, and they're trying to have one every month, the first of every month, for holistic demands that are designed, hopefully, building a movement that will shift power to the people. It was initiated by Cooperation Jackson, now has been joined by other labor movements and a broad-based coalition of different groups, political organizations, and whatnot. And the thing is that this is an opportunity, like just like we said, it's an opportunity for the powers that be to tighten their grip on and their control and this and even be doing more displacing of the rest of us outside of the system. It's also should be seen as an opportunity to us because the illegitimacy of the system is more exposed than it was before, and we had to do our job to kind of let people know this is that there's a different way possible. That there should be no reason why we're seeing on the news media them pretending to scramble. They're not pretending. They're actually trying to scramble for a treatment for for COVID-19 and a vaccine for COVID-19 when Cuba actually has it.
Exactly.
Right.
It has a treatment, not a vaccine, but it has treatments and it's been working. And they're pretending that there's nothing else out there, and that they're even trying to do more distraction by accusing. Now you're hearing in the news how the virus started in Wuhan, China, in a laboratory. But people don't know. Of course, the news is putting that out there, not talking about the regular testing with viruses and other kind of things that the United States does regularly. It's been doing biochemical testing and all that for a long time, and it's had many accidents where things has escaped these laboratories. So it's not like I think that also that's a distraction. So we could. It doesn't matter how it got out there. It's out here. And the problem is, the issue is that we need to figure out how to mitigate the deaths, the health, health mortality, health suffering that's going on, and also the economic suffering that's happening as a result of the system not being designed to deal with it.
Yeah, and along those lines, Reverend Hagler, the fact that in this country and all of the countries that Netfa and Abdus mentioned have some aspects of widespread testing, a comprehensive quarantining, but also they have much stronger social safety nets because most of those countries have a strong socialist element to that. And we're not just talking about like ideology, right? We're not like these people are not like the second coming of Ho Chi Minh, for goodness sakes. These are governments that are in the time of crisis are making sure that their citizens have food. If we know you can't go to work, then we know you can't earn a living, so we're going to make sure that you eat. If you can't get out, we're going to make sure that the doctors come to you. The testing is available and it's free. Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro is supposed to be practically the Stalin of the Caribbean, I guess. But
South America.
South America. But he has frozen rent in Venezuela for 6 months. Told the landlords, "No, y'all ain't gonna get you don't expect it." But also, he is paying the salaries of employees who cannot go to work for 6 months. And he's also subsidizing businesses so they don't go out of business. So these are things that other governments, other states, and even Kerala, a state within India that has a strong leftist government, is providing services for the people in Kerala that the Modi government is not doing for most of India. But here in a lot of these states, Rev, especially here in DC, we got this Reopen DC committee, right? And these people on this committee, they ain't talking about a moratorium on rent. I think the mayor has issued a moratorium on evictions, but that hasn't stopped landlords from filing for evictions
Exactly.
to be
That's right.
actionable whenever this stay-at-home order ends. There has been no moratorium issued on rents. There has been no moratorium issued on mortgages. That people are being fed through the mutual aid society. So what is up with this Reopen DC commission that has not one health expert on it?
Well, as I said, this is really to re-give away DC again. And when you look at it, you have what Susan Rice and Chertoff as the co-chair. Who are they? What are they? And I lift that up because I'm marrying people, y'all.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't know who they are with. I mean, I know who they are, but they ain't gone through what we going through.
Yeah.
Right? You sit there and you have Adrian Fenty, who was the mayor that gave the keys of the city to develop. And you had Anthony Williams on the committee who engineered the displacement of people from the city and put this into motion. And Adrian Fenty don't even live in D.C. He lives in California.
Yeah,
So how
right.
the hell is he going to be a part of Reopen D.C., right? So when I began to look down at it, in fact, even on the education committee, there was not one educator on the committee.
Wow.
So how are you going to talk about reopening the schools and you ain't got one teacher there? So the outcry went out, and they finally went and got Liz Davis, the chair of the teachers, president of the teachers union. But she's the only educator up in there because there are no educators up in there. It's just laden with developers. It's laden with all of those folks who have been the players in terms of really auctioning off, selling off, and stealing parts of DC.
I mean, and
They
this
don't live where we live, and they ain't going through what we're going through.
No.
exactly, exactly. I mean, we were talking last week. I mean, I don't. Talk all the time about how like our little daily, our little routine that we have. Me and Abdus, like on Sundays. Normally, we would be up and we'd be watching Al Jazeera or some, and then we flip over to CNN and MSNBC to see what ridiculousness they're saying. But usually when we wake up on Sundays, we hit Al Jazeera first, and then we'll see what the other talking heads are saying, and we'll talk about this stuff on the way to church. So that's been changed because, now we get up and we go downstairs. One of us makes breakfast and we're listening to WPFW downstairs. And then, one of us will bring the coffee upstairs and like, is it time for church? And we turn on the computer. It's time for church, but we're talking about these issues all of the time, all of the time. And Abdus is a transplant. He's only been here since a little bit before we've been married, but about 7 years. So he has no idea what DC was like, for real DC was like before now. But he's from Camden. So the same problems, the same black misleadership class, the same neoliberal corporate capitalist kind of land grabs displacing poor and black people, destroying the manufacturing base. So, people can't get decent blue collar jobs that took care of their families like they did, with your dad and my, parents. And we've got these politicians who look like us, but they don't live like us, so they don't think like us. And they don't see us as like them. That we're just like you said, Netfa, they subscribe to a different ideology. They subscribe to the ideology of capital, and to imperialism, and we just don't fit. We are in their way. And for a lot of us, who grew up under Marion Barry, I'm always on by any means necessary having to defend Marion Barry, you know, because I think for some of us, I don't know. It's like I feel like for some of us, the lure of capitalism is just so great sometimes that it's just easier to want to be like the oppressor than it is to keep struggling against the oppressor, for some people. And I don't know, I just kind of thought about that the other day, but I'm so many people don't know the history of cities like Camden and DC and Philadelphia, and all of these major hubs. Baltimore.
I mean, Baltimore.
Yeah, and even cities in the South where there's a lot of organizing going on. You mentioned Netfa, Kali Akuno and Cooperation Jackson down there in Jackson, Mississippi, where, the black working class has been struggling. In the struggle to organize workers and organize the people and to continually fight against this capitalist imperialist machine. And here we are. That was already going on, right? That was already happening. And here we are. COVID-19 hits us. And everything we have been trying to educate people on, all the inequalities, all of the inequities and the obscenities, really, that exist in this system that have been levied against us, it's just all laid bare. So now it's like, as Reverend Hagler said, burying people. I mean, literally. Rev, how many funerals have you had to do this past month?
It's a
April,
lot of the
yeah.
bodies were in storage. Funeral homes are now starting to figure out what to deal with. So I'm getting one scheduled after another. I had one on Monday last week. I had one on Thursday last week. I got one on Tuesday coming up this week. I got somebody else who's died, and I got to schedule that one yet. And so we're just continuing to run. I had a couple of them, about three or four that I have not done yet, and who have been passed on. So it's just continuing. It's continuing. It's not subsiding. Somebody called me today and said I just tested positive for the virus. I have no symptoms, but I tested positive. I think the other thing we're going to find out is that a lot of people have had the virus,
Mm-hmm.
have tested positive, and so that's one way it spreads so quickly.
Yeah.
Is that you just do not know, and all of the so-called stuff that they're doing is simply because they're taking a shot in the dark, trying to figure out what they do because nobody really truly knows what to do. They can sound all authoritative all they want. As I was joking with somebody, I was saying, leave me alone. I'm sitting here having a Lysol cocktail with a flashlight shining down my throat.
Well, we're at the end of our show, and
Ah,
we just like to thank our guest, Reverend Hagler, who is the senior pastor of Plymouth United Church of Christ in Washington D.C., and also our great friend Netfa Freeman,
mm-hmm.
who is the leader of PACA, which was the Pan African Community Action
Organizer, he hates that.
organizer. Okay,
Organizer for
right,
Pan African
organizer,
Community
right.
Action.
Bring me out the organization, brother.
Oh, well, real quick.
but again, I wanted. Well, go ahead, and then we'll read some of the comments.
Yeah, real quick, Netfa. I wanted to ask you what we just got from Reverend Hagler. What does organizing in the faith community look like in the midst of this? What we are dealing with as a faith community. What does it look like for you as a organization in the community? Now, we know, but from Paca's perspective, what does it look like? Organizing in the midst of coronavirus, now that all of this is laid bare, everything that we've been trying to educate people on is just right out there now, but we've still got to contend with keeping safe and avoiding ourselves becoming infected.
Well, I know there's a lot of groups doing some really creative and remarkable stuff. And for us, we know that it has to do with doing a lot of collecting resources and getting them to the people who may not have resources. It also goes into educating people, and including political education, but also education, health education, the importance of social distancing and cleanliness and hygiene and all that kind of stuff. But also trying to create what's really mutual aid societies, getting the people in the community to depend on each other, and to organize and pool their resources to depend on each other, and to also realize we have to grow what we're doing outside of the geographical confines of our community and our city. We have to first focus on where we are, organize locally, and then try to have something that expands outwardly to be able to also challenge dynamics.
Yeah. Again,
Absolutely.
absolutely. So we thank you both for joining us today, this evening, and much success in all the endeavors. We have some comments we want to read, right?
Yeah, there are. Let's see, Steph Kreff over here on YouTube. What's going on, everybody? Hey, Maurice, Lisa Spencer, Steph, Mad Black Star, and Zach Mills. Steph Kreff says, an important question about COVID-19. Did you know about the G6PD deficiency with black people and the then false treatment with hydrochloroquine? We knew about hydrochloroquine, and for those of you who don't know, I the co-host of By Any Means Necessary on Sputnik Radio. So 5 days a week that we talk about this stuff. We knew about this mess, and we talked about it when it first came out that it was garbage. But you know what? That man is those people's white supremacist Antichrist savior, and they will listen to anything he says. If he says, well, I can't even, that's not even a joke anymore because he actually said it. If he says to drink bleach, they will drink bleach. I mean, so yeah, that whatever the deficiency is, I'm we're real careful not to give out a whole bunch of medical information. Number one, because there is a lot that the medical community is still learning about how this virus works. They don't know everything because it is a new coronavirus, and we're not doctors. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you something that I'm not going to pretend like, I know more than I do. So I have no idea about the G6PD deficiency among black people. I don't know, but we do know that hydrochloroquine is garbage. We knew that from the beginning. So.
And we have another viewer over here, Michael B. The more affluent types who have the means to travel more freely are responsible for spreading COVID-19 more so than anyone. The working class and poor folks infected, particularly black people concentrated in the, quote, essential workforces, are being infected due to how capitalism has positioned us within the economy. And I think no one can argue with that. So again, we're out of time.
We are out
right,
of time.
We're definitely out of time this time.
Yes, because I got to get my steak for dinner because he's making me steak for dinner.
Right, and it ain't gonna get done if we keep talking.
Get done if we keep talking.
So anyway, I'd really like to thank our guests again, Reverend Graylin Hagler and Brother Netfa Freeman. Thank you for joining us. And I gotta say, to our audience, just real quickly. These are men who we really, really look up to and admire. Reverend Hagler, I've always referred to him as really my spiritual father, and really, I mean, like, don't, I know my dad's watching. Dad, don't get jealous, but and Nefa's like my brother, man. I mean, he is my brother, and so I mean, these are people who we really, I know I am very, very honored to know. So again,
y'all know how I feel about you.
Right. So before we leave, this is our this is where we we
plug the stuff.
Right. So anyway, look, if you like what you if you like what you heard, if you like what you see, if you want to see more of this, consider being a patron. We have a show on Wednesday that's for patrons only, and it's starting to become it's really success. A lot of our patrons really like our Wednesday show. It's patron only content. You go to our patron page. We have a lot of stuff just for our patrons. So please, we don't look. We're not choosy. I mean, whatever you can afford. If you really want to see independent media continue, consider being a patron. And also, thinking of others beside ourselves, our faith communities, as Reverend Hagler has said plenty of times. They're suffering, and I mean, like, there's, I mean, thank God there are people who are still giving, but it's not like when you're there, and they're in our church community and our religious communities are really taking a hit. So please, if you can, support the churches and support the religious communities during this time, and also those who are organizing out there, like PACA and others who are out there organizing amongst the people. They're, they could use financial help also. This stuff, the revolution has to be funded. And so, we can't just sit back and think that these things are going to take care of themselves. They're not. The revolution has to be funded. So look, whatever you have, whatever you can give, please consider giving. And this is, look, if you can't be out there on the front lines, at least fund it.
Absolutely. So, Reverend Hagler, Netfa Freeman, our father and our brother and our brothers in the struggle. Absolutely. Thank you all both so much for joining us tonight.
Why can't I be the father? Why can't I be the brother?
I said you're the brother in the struggle
Yep.
too. I caught myself real quick.
This is why we got to go get our steak.
Yeah, this is we love y'all so much. Y'all take care. All
I
right.
love y'all too.
And thank you all for watching. This is Jackie Luqman and Abdul Shahid Luqman and Stinky Brewski Luqman down here on the floor. Y'all, be really good to each other. Be very, very safe. And as always, peace. But only if you are willing to fight for it.
That's right.
All right, sir.
All right.
That was nice. It was good to see that.
Yep.